Welcome everyone to Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Thank you for joining us today. We will be having a discussion about Africa's grey giants, elephants. Today I'm joined by Michelle Henley from Elephants Alive, and it's great to have her on the show today to discuss the amazing work they've been doing with elephants and, of course, elephant conservation here in Africa. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Russell.
Good to have you with us. How are you this evening?
Very well, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Me too. I always love chatting about elephants, and I know you guys are doing some super fun and great stuff. So let's dive right in, shall we? So as we always start the show, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so I'm Michelle Henley, and I am besotted with elephants. I've been working on them for many years. It's 25 years now. I'm currently the CEO of a non-profit company called Elephants Alive. And we've got some amazing projects that we're running at the moment. And, you know, from a personal perspective, I just am so fascinated by elephants because they just bring you into their world and also challenge you on so many levels, because when you study elephants, you know, you end up moving into ethics, into economics, into problem solving when they become when there's human-elephant conflict situations. And they also teach you to network. I mean, elephants are networkers extreme. Because the strength of an individual elephant depends on the connectivity of the whole population and their particular herd and their clans. So yeah, very fascinating species, and I feel incredibly privileged to be working with them. So thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit of my world with you.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, it's great to have you with us, and always nice to have, you know, passionate scientists and conservationists out there joining us on the show and spreading the word. That's really what we're all about. So tell us a little bit about the history of Elephants Alive and how that came to be.
So yes, I knew I wanted to study zoology, and then in 1996 I studied many years, studied 12 years to be qualified. But in 1996, I started drawing elephant ear patterns in the private reserves to the west of Kruger, just for fun, with my mother, who's an artist. And we became, and this was obviously after reading those books by Cynthia Moss and Joyce Poole and Ian Douglas Hamilton. And we just became absolutely addicted to understanding which elephants are hanging out with which other ones. It's like a whole big bush soap opera. And that addiction led to me being invited by the current chairperson of Elephants Alive, Marlene McKay, to come and run an elephant project in the private reserves for her after she and Dr. Ian Douglas Hamilton from Save the Elephants had fitted the first tracking device onto elephants in 1998. So, and I've never looked back, and I've never regretted one day of being involved in elephants. So it's got a long history, quarter of a century now.
That's amazing.
But it's still nothing. It's nothing compared to an elephant's life, really.
No. I mean, we've chatted before on the show about, you know, the responsibility that comes with, you know, elephants in, you know, orphaned elephants in captivity, how long their lifespan is, you know, often exceeding 60, 70 years. It really is, you know, a life's dedication and really, really tough. And of course, you guys involved with populations and that dynamic between all of them. You know, to me, there's almost nothing more interesting than seeing a group of different herds, you know, coming down to the waterhole, and you have these mega herds all together. Everybody's a little bit agitated, but some of them a little bit more friendly than others. And I love watching it on the cameras now with so many elephants around at the waterholes. You know, you see a lot of that action. So it's lovely to have somebody, you know, to interpret that for us a little bit better, you know, almost like the elephant version of Meerkat Manor going on at the waterholes right now. So really, really fun.
Especially at the height of the dry season, you know, which the elephants are just absolutely dependent on that water. And you get wonderful sightings because the bush isn't so dense. So I'm sure you're seeing amazing things on your cameras.
We are. There's a lot of action, so it's great to have you with us, as I said. But I believe you've been up in Mozambique and busy up there for the last few weeks or months. Can you tell us a little bit about the elephant corridors and what your goal is there?
Yeah, so I mean, that's just a whole new world that's opened up to us. And, you know, we go where our collared elephants take us, and they take us to the strangest places at times. Like they take us to mine dumps because there's a lot of phosphorus, and then they take us through communities with high densities of people, and then they take us to the most beautiful forested, pristine areas. So we never thought when we started collaring elephants in Mozambique in 2016 that we'd actually end up finding elephants that are connecting the Kruger National Park to the Futi corridor, which is the where the coastal population of elephants in Mozambique reside. And it's just incredible to watch these elephants move almost 200 kilometers through really dangerous areas, because some areas are very densely populated, but they're smart enough to do it at night when people are sleeping. Yeah. And literally, I think when the people wake up in the morning, they see the tracks that went on their footpaths and maybe some elephant dung and thought, what on earth happened here? But, you know, and they move very directionally to avoid conflict, because actually elephants don't want to have conflict with people. So they've learned when we're sleeping and when it's the safest to move through our areas, or maybe if they need nutrients, they'll steal some crops and then try and get out of there in the day when they know we'll be more active. So it's just been incredible to see that there's this connectivity between protected areas. You know, when the trans-frontier conservation areas were proclaimed, everybody thought that's an amazing initiative to enlarge the range of elephants because they have such large spatial needs. But what they're actually showing us now is that even the protected areas that we've given them is still too small. You know, they are moving at scales much larger than that, where they are connecting protected areas. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity to look for these corridors, so these areas that elephants use more consistently, and also have very directional movement within those areas, and then to involve people, so to increase the tolerance between people and wildlife. So if you can start thinking of community-owned corridors, where you teach people certain skills to live with elephants. So you teach them to keep beehives around their crops so that they don't get crop raided, or you teach them to grow unpalatable crops as barriers to their corn crops. And the big thing is that people can then make money out of these mitigation methods, which then at the end of the day, they start experiencing living with wildlife as a bonus and not a burden. And I think that's where we need to go, because actually a large portion of elephants' range is outside of protected areas. And so we need to teach people to be more tolerant of living with wildlife. So I think it's just amazing stage that is opened because of these incredible corridor trailblazing elephant movements. And it's teaching us to move outside, well, certainly teaching me to move outside of this ecological frame of mind to more a social economic frame of mind. And I find that very exciting, and also I'm very grateful for the elephants for always widening the lens.
Yeah, they have a nasty habit of widening our perspective on things. I couldn't agree more, really. And also, it sounds like a really difficult and nuanced kind of project, as you say. Whenever you're starting to involve a wildlife and human interaction, I'm not even going to say conflict. It's always tricky on how you balance that. And I know that that will be, I'm sure, one of your biggest challenges while you're up there. So, best of luck. We'll be keeping an eye on that for sure. One of your projects is identifying elephant individuals. And what is the purpose of that study, and how difficult is it to identify them? I have trouble often when people ask me on the cameras, who is that, elephant that's just arrived, and if it doesn't have a collar, or if it doesn't have very specific, pretty severe scarring or a broken tusk in a certain way can be really tricky. What is your perspective on that?
Well, so it's actually, I think when everybody sees elephants for the first time or experiences them, you just think, wow, big grey animal that feeds for 18 hours a day and just overpowered basically by their size. But then when you start looking in detail at the margin of their ears, and you actually start drawing that and trying to get re-sightings of known animals. So these ear margins, you look at things like holes or nicks or tears, and you look at the positioning of those features on the ear margin, then that allows you to recognize various individuals and also look at how the ear margin changes over time. I mean, obviously, if there's some other blaringly obvious features like massive tusks or a missing tail, it's really easy to recognize that individual. But the brain is a wonderful thing, and you can train your brain to recognize particular individuals that have characteristic ears. I mean, one of our staff members, Ronnie Makakulu, is just amazing. He's got a photographic brain when it comes to elephant ear patterns, and he's been, he used to come to me as a 12-year-old little schoolboy and also got addicted to elephant ear patterns, and he can recognize at least 800 individuals. So, I mean, it might be great for you to have like a little quiz show with Ronnie where people send their photos and he tries to recognize them on particular cameras if it's older bulls with known features. But yes, you certainly can, and it's based on the ear margin. That's how we recognize individuals.
Okay. Well, that sounds amazing. 800 individuals. That's definitely not me. I think we should get Ronnie to do that for us. That'll be quite helpful. But sounds like fun. But as you say, an important way of identifying individuals, and it's not always as easy as people think, or as you say, sometimes they just look like one big gray mass. But another way that we can sometimes identify them is, of course, the collars that we spoke about, that, of course, you're using for tracking them in various areas. But what research is being done with those particular elephants? What are you looking at with those collared elephants?
Okay, so, I mean, the reason why, and we've got over 2,000 elephants on file, individually identified elephants, and the reason why we have that is to understand how the social dynamics are driving elephant movements. So who associates with who, where, and when, and that's where this whole bush soap opera starts evolving. But the collars, we get an idea of the spatial movements of elephants, so the extent over which they move. And if you back that up with the study, with the ID study, you're busy looking at very important drivers of elephant movements, which is often safety. So elephants are very conscious of where it's safe. They're driven by nutrient requirements, and they're driven by social requirements. So you can't look at social requirements unless you have an ID study. And also, you start realizing with the collars, you start realizing the extent to which animals, and we start finding all these amazing corridors. You can also look at associations and how far apart elephants coordinate their movements. What is an association? There's so much. I mean, we actually drive our whole ID study based on the collared elephants. So we try and find a collared elephant, or at least 3 per day. And then we look at who's associating with that individual over time. And then you can also look at stuff like reproductive status, because you can start seeing which bulls coming to must at which age and for how long, and who do they associate with. So there's so much you can do. The collars are absolutely critical to, they become, to me, an elephant with a collar on becomes a storyteller in its own right, because now you're sharing their world and you're seeing how they're making their decisions in their everyday life. And you've got almost this eye in the sky, because the satellites are following this animal, and you can see how they're thinking at landscape level. It's not as far as what your car does. So it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that is amazing. I didn't actually realize how the two worked so closely hand in hand, the collars and the ID projects as well, which is really, really interesting. I'd be very keen to see, what big picture stuff you guys are going to get from all this. And I know it's going to be unbelievable. So looking forward to that. You know, we have cameras around the Lady Game Lodge in Baluli. You know, could we see some of those elephants that you have collared or identified?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's three famous elephants. We call them the three naughty boys. One, Derek Lotter. So these were three elephants that we named when they broke out of the private reserves. Everybody thought they were breaking out of a fence, but we soon realized after they went to crop raid the mango farmers about 46 kilometers down the Olifants River. We soon realized that after a massive operation where we brought them back, but we put collars on one of the animals that we collared on foot, and then we just saw, oh, they're actually climbing over the weir, they're not breaking the fence. And we had to bring them because then we had to fortify the weir. But those three elephants are, to me, amazing. So, and you'll definitely see them because they love moving around Baluli. And they've got, you know, they're young bulls. And they've, I mean, this story is actually the power of a mango, because ever since tasting a mango at the height of the dry season, they've shifted their home range to where that weir is. So the core of their home range is near that weir, because they always, and they try more so than at other times when it's the height of the dry season, they're right there hoping there's some weak point that they can go and taste. So, I mean, those are the fascinating individual elephants that you can get to see. There's also an elephant called Charlize. She's part of a breeding herd, and you can also potentially see her come and drink. So there's quite a few elephants, and there's also elephants that we collared on the east, closer towards Kruger, that are slowly shifting their range to the west. So there's a whole lot of elephants you can see.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll be watching for those naughty boys. That sounds like fun. I'd love to see that. I've actually seen the elephants getting out around areas like Botswana and getting into those mango plantations. It's crazy how obsessed they become with the mangoes.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know, and stories like that, of course, are always so special. Michelle, what's been your most memorable experience working with elephants, do you think? I know that's probably a tough question.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's probably two levels to that question. I mean, there's the most challenging was probably bringing those three naughty boys back, you know, following their movements for 3 months, keeping them out of the mango fields, because the farmers didn't want them to be hurt. And we really respected that incredible request that they put to us. So we had to get to understand their movements, and we had to plan it with 2 helicopters, about 3 vets, 3 flatbed trucks. It was really challenging. And also, you know, burning chili dung balls at night to keep them out of the mango farmers to keep them out of the mango farms to buy us some time. It was physically a very challenging but memorable and very successful mitigation strategy that we worked on. But in terms of touching the heart, you know, there's this one elephant called Matambu who's totally blind, and sadly recently passed away. But he really got to know our vehicle, and there was a moment, and maybe it's because he was blind, that he really had a very fine sense of discernment with his hearing. But if he was in the distance and we'd pull up with a research vehicle to, you know, watch him, he would contact Rumble from a distance and then walk over to where we were parked, often share the same pool of shade, and fall fast asleep right next to the car. And wake up, and then he would defecate and urinate, and then he would contact Rumble again as if to say, come on now, let's go, follow me. That as the biggest compliment, because that elephant had the most incredible nature.
Wow, yeah, that sounds amazing. That rumble call is so special as it is, you know, from any elephant. So I'm sure that must have been so special. Thanks for that little insights. I love those kinds of stories. In all your research, I'm sure there's been many things, but what has been a particular thing that surprised you about elephant behavior?
I think it's quite, I mean, there's so many facets, but I would say what really, really appeals to me about elephants is their empathy that they have for each other. They're not classified as sentient beings for nothing in our normal standards for managing elephants in South Africa. And that's because they have this ability to feel what another elephant is feeling. And I've experienced many touching moments, often around the bones of elephants, because they're very conscious of the bones of their own kind. And then they go almost into like a mourning ceremony where their whole body persona changes and they just silently caress the bones. Sometimes they pick it up and carry it. Those are very special moments. But also some of the stories of the landowners that share these landscapes with the elephants. There was one landowner that told me about these 3 bulls that came down to a waterhole right in front of his house. And he soon noticed the one bull had a massive hole in the upper trunk. And he was really worried that it would now not be able to drink water because it couldn't suck up water. And then he just as he was getting worried and thought he'd phone the warden, the other bull sucked up water before he even drank it, walked to that bull and put his trunk in his mouth and gave him the water. And they did that for the 3 days that they were around. And he soon realized the other elephants will look after this elephant. So, this makes elephants so special. They're intelligent, they're smart, they're even witty. And of course, they're so full with empathy for each other.
Well, I've got goosebumps. That just sounds insane. I can't imagine watching that actually happening before your eyes of another, as you say, another individual, especially 2 males, not even particularly of the same herd. That's unbelievable. A tough one that we always have to think about with elephants and just about all the animals, under our care these days. What is one of the biggest challenges facing elephant conservation?
Well, it's quite concerning that elephants were always classified as vulnerable with the IUCN red listing, and they've recently been classified as endangered, and the forest elephant as critically endangered. And that's because, their numbers are still plummeting because of the demand for ivory, also the increase in human-elephant conflict. So if you look back 100 years, we probably lost 97% of the continental population, which I think is absolutely shocking. And the challenges that they face is, they compete with us for the same resources. But I think we need to dig really deep into ourselves as humans and just realize what an absolute privilege it is to share the planet with these massive animals that are actually filled with compassion and care for each other, and really try and work on innovative ways to diminish human-elephant conflict. And there are a lot of people that are really thinking outside of the box. I think we need to involve local communities, let them take ownership of living with wildlife. I think we need to embrace in South Africa the principles of Ubuntu, which means I am because you are, and really bring that into the elephant world and into the elephant space, and respect things like the connectivity of the landscape, because they, got these maps that they pass on from generation to generation, which is based on a world that we're losing so quickly. And I think if we start looking at elephants as landscape planners, as mega fertilizing animals, as constant gardeners, as seed dispersers, there's just a million things that elephants bring into our world that to me would make our world so much poorer if we didn't have them. So I think it's time to realize we must keep them here. We need to fight for them, and we need to think creatively to keep them here. And we also, on a philosophical level, we need to realize what they bring to our world and really work at that to keep them in our space.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, lovely insight. And I hope that everyone out there listening, takes it to heart. It's so important that we have more and more people involved in understanding the plight of these animals across the continent, across the world. But, for us in particular, of course, with our focus here in Africa. But yeah, just lovely chatting to you today. And it's been a great pleasure having you on the show.
Right. Thank you so much. And I hope that you as inspired, or your viewers are as inspired, or those people that get to see a snapshot of an elephant on a camera What a privilege, what a joy and what a privilege. And let's all work at keeping it that way.
Thank you, Michelle, and all the best for your continued work at Elephants Alive. And we'll be keeping an eye out for those wonderful Ellies and, of course, those naughty boys on the cameras. And hopefully they'll cross our paths once in a while, and we can keep you up to date with what they're up to as well with the cameras.
Thank you.
But thank you once again to all of you for watching the show. Please join us again next week for Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay informed for any of our upcoming shows. But from all of us, for now, it is cheers.